What's up, Nova Heads? It's Amber Nova.
This is Chris Lights Out Lytle.
Hi, this is Ray Boom Boom Mancini.
Ice Boogie.
It's the real and raw August Artois.
This is Smiling Sam Alvey.
It's Archimedes.
I'm Jack Cartwheel, the real deal, the human highlight reel.
This is Steve Mowry.
I'm Victor Henry.
Floyd Bulletproof Trooper.
Billy Stark.
It's ECW Original, The Enforcer, C.W. Anderson.
This is Honest John.
Hyper Street. I'm Luis Moreno. And
it's Mr. Classic.
Anthony Noe.
I'm Jason Punet.
The young ghost.
Hey! It's old Hattie Price here.
When I say what's my name, Snipes.
Richie Slade. My name is Gino Rivera, the Frank Sinatra of the Spanish Mafia.
The incredible one, Anthony Idol.
This is Ken Shamrock.
The Golden Boy, Jordan Clearwater. Yo, watch and listen.
Championship Online.
Podcast with this is Alex Mars here. Hi, Richard Modest.
So, please listen to it, otherwise be cursed. Okay, see you later. Love that, Dennis.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to exciting episode Championship on the Line podcast, Lucha Talk. Today, I have a legend, a true legend to the sport of professional wrestling. You've seen him in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, MTV's Wrestling Society X, Rev Pro Wrestling, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, and so much more. He is formerly from the Velvet Rope of Studio 54 in Tempe, Armenia, King of Copacabana, the one and only Disco Machine.
How you doing? Wow, that's I forget that I did all those things. Yes, thank you.
No worries. I try my best. Usually Alex, my co-host, he reads it so well, so you can tell he does the intros, but just reading it, I mean, you've had an amazing career. I mean, you've done so much, so much it's hard to even read because it's an amazing thing. Again, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Obviously, for the fans, we know who you are, Disco Machine, obviously. But for the new fans that are listening, we want to start from the beginning. How did you get introduced into professional wrestling?
Well, it's so funny that you say that, because I'm like, do people remember? It's been a while since. I mean, it's been a decade since I've last wrestled, but I did a few things. I definitely overachieved. That's biggest thing that I want to put out there. I super overachieved in all this. I actually moved from Phoenix to Los Angeles in 1997. And at the time, right before that, I had met Ron Rivera, American Wild Child. He was actually working for Conan at the time. And this was in 96, actually. And they did a show in Phoenix. Actually, AAA did a show. So it was Conan, it was Psychosis, Ray Jr., La Parca, Halloween, Damien, Piroth Jr. And it just happened to be coming to Phoenix. And it was at a place called the Celebrity Theater in Phoenix. And really, I just went and I saw this guy walking around with an ECW t-shirt. And I was like, it was at the time that you couldn't get those, regularly. Right. I knew of them, but I was like, someone who actually had one, amazing. So I stopped him and it was Ron. And I didn't know it at the time. It was my first time I ever met him. And he was working for Conan at the time. And what he was doing was I think he was doing a lot of the taping. They were taping a lot of the stuff that they were doing at the time. I mean, this is like the 90s when tape trading was still a big thing. Right. So recording that, doing a lot of backstage stuff. And that's how they would kind of make, you make side income doing that. Yeah. And so I just kept in touch with Ron. And then when I eventually moved out to Los Angeles, they were starting up the school, and I kind of helped them do that because of my graphic design background. I helped them, put up their website, do logos, flyers, and stuff like that. It was basically my currency for, training. And that's how I met Super Dragon, Mr. Excitement, Excalibur. And we started doing shows in, I would say, end of 98, 99 ish. And yeah, we never looked back. And I mean, a lot of the stuff that we did was, you know, people say innovative, but at the time, you know, like UPW was the big deal. Everybody wanted to go to WWE, and we just wanted to just wrestle and just be and just do matches. You know, the formula for us was a little bit Michinoku Pro, a little bit Toryumon, Lucha Libre, New Japan Juniors, and All Japan heavyweights. You know, it's like, so we were super influenced by like a lot of different hybrid styles, and we just did it. And there was not really no looking back or asking for permission, really.
No, I mean, for sure. I mean, right away when I just thought of all these memories around those years too, and especially with PWG, Alex and I started watching SoCal wrestling even more in independence around 2006 and 7, and the whole time we would hear names like Humor Tornado and then Kevin Steen, and then we would hear Disco Machine and Joey Ryan and so many names. There was PWG, and it was kind of far from where we lived, and we're like, what is this amazing thing called Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and who are all these names? And we couldn't go to it because we were so young, but we always watched them on YouTube. Fortunately, we got to watch Empire Wrestling Federation, and we went to a couple of alternative wrestling show, AWS.
Okay.
We're looking at clips, and we saw you featured in it. So I'm like, this man's been everywhere in SoCal. So awesome.
Yeah, it was during that time at the end, you know, basically like I look at it like 2000 ish, you know, like when everything kind of came together, and we were just kind of like in a bubble of like, everything was going on out here, whether it be UPW, New Japan had their dojo in Santa Monica, AWS, Bart had his thing going, and we did shows regularly out there. Rev Pro was running strong still, and at that time, like Epic, you know, was kind of coming together. A lot of other promotions, you know, Jesse's always been doing EWF. That's always been running strong. So, and then, you know, all the APW up north, and, you know, there's so many things, you know, and there were so many like lucha shows, you know, I don't want to discount that, because like we used to go to all the lucha shows too and work on those shows like WPW, and also in Compton, I think it was FMLL. So we were really kind of lucky in a sense that it was kind of booming at the time. And if I remember correctly, wrestling as a whole wasn't doing that great. And it eventually had its boom during kind of like the Attitude Era. But at the time it was kind of like stagnant, even though that like WCW was big at the time, and you know, all the Nitro Wars and stuff like that. But it was like on the independent scene, there was a lot to be gained, and especially here, and there was a lot of people coming here. And so yeah, we just happened to get lucky during a time when it came and it boomed. And for people to now talk about like a PWG style, it kind of makes me laugh, because it's like we never set out to do like a style. It was just like, we basically knew what type of matches that we wanted to do, and really how to actually I give Super Dragon, you know, all of the credit on that. He knew how to structure matches that people wanted to see from guys our size, and it really helped us kind of understand, you know, basically it became a style only because we just kind of mixed in these different things. So it was, you know, it was fast, but it was strong style, but it was like, you know, flashy, and there was a lot that we did that we didn't really consciously kind of plan. We just kind of did it.
Oh no, for sure. Does it feel odd sometimes? Like you mentioned, they're trying to do a PWG style, and especially so many indie companies, especially Alex and I covered, we've seen promoters like, we just want to get to that level of Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, the history they've done, just to get close to what PWG has done. It would be an honor to be, you know, recognized as, you know, similar, you know, just to say, oh, they're just as a caliber as PWG, you know, as these small indie promotions. Like, what does it mean when people say stuff like that about Pro Wrestling Guerrilla?
It's weird, because us, like, you know, wrestling's been around for so long, and it's like for us to be credited with that style, it's odd. And you know, when I look at it's kind of funny because like we would watch like stuff from Michinoku Pro, let's say, and SEMA, Dick Togo, you know, all those, you know, Kaintai DX and all of, you know, all of those factions. And then we watch Toriyamon and watch, you know, the Muscle Outlaws and you know, it's like, you know, all of a sudden they're wrestling in PWG. So it's like, it was really interesting how the people that influenced us were eventually on our shows. And I know later on, after I had left PWG, like, you know, Jushin Liger was on the shows, you know, and just all of those legends that eventually came through PWG, and for us to be, you know, to be the breeding ground for, like, you know, the stars like Kevin Steen and El Generico, you know, getting his chance, and I wonder whatever happened to El Generico. Right. But I mean, it became like you know, a place where people expected to see the highest level. And again, we were just trying to do the best matches. And actually, I take that back. So when we first started PWG, our goal was to have like basically a super show every show. So top to bottom, like the first match to the last match was going to be the best. And that defies wrestling. You know, any promoter out there just says, you know, you build, you know, till the main event. We never saw it that way. We always wanted, you know, every match should be competing for the best match. And that's basically what the PWG style is. It's every match trying to, you know, win best match for the evening. And so there was a lot of pressure on, you know, even opening matches to be really good. And so, you know, eventually when we started taking a lot more of the assumption of the kind of the manager roles and doing a lot of the production stuff, I felt like my matches suffered because of that. And it was only because it was like, there was so much to do during the week, and they weren't billable hours, but it was, you know, it was a labor of love, and you know, some people are in it, and I'm no longer in it, but I still watch with one eye every so often.
It's hard not to. I mean, even for like Alex, I have so many friends that not, you know, we're trying to get into pro wrestling, you watch, and right away they mention to PWG, like, oh, we know they do a show once a year, they come back, like, how's that? I'm like, unfortunately, you haven't went because it sells out so quickly. And then they start looking at all the matches. And then recently, before we did this interview, Alex and I were looking at all the match cards. And like you said, each match was like trying to top one another. And then you look at all the names on that. It's just like, to see what so much has done now, it's just incredible. Especially that time.
And it always wasn't like that. I mean, if you see when we first started, and we started in 2003, you know, the card is not great, and it had to start somewhere. And you know, even the people that were on it, you know, some people have ascended to great heights, others haven't, or are still kind of local. And that, I mean, we had to start somewhere, and eventually it started growing. And even, you know, when I left, I mean, it started getting pretty big. I remember, I think my last match was in 2007 or 8, I think 2008. And I mean, my last match for PWG was, it was me and Kikutaro versus Cole Cabana and Top Gun Tall War. I couldn't ask for a better match to be my last match. But it was like, I mean, and Colt at that time was just going to WWE. So that was still, that was still the holy grail of like where people wanted to be in professional wrestling. I was always 10 years older than everybody. So, you know, if I was, you know, my last match was when I was 38, you know, and I don't think some people knew, some people didn't, but it's like, I knew that wasn't my destination. I was basically, you know, at the time it was just like, I tried to do as much as I could do in wrestling. I mean, wrestling in Japan for me was super big dream. Wrestling in Mexico, I've wrestled in Alaska, Hawaii, and on TV. So like, there's nothing that I can say that I didn't do. there's certain little things, but it's like nothing that I'd say like, oh wow, like I totally failed. But I'm like I said, I totally overachieved when it came to anything wrestling.
Oh no, you definitely did. What you did in PWG in your career, and like you said, wrestling in different countries and wrestling on TV. Like, so people just want just a glimpse of that, and you did it. So honestly, as a fan, you've had an amazing career. Alex and I enjoyed watching you over the years, and even watching your matches recently. It's like a flash from the pan. I was watching a match of you and Ronan. I'm like, I remember Ronan. I remember him in AWS back in the day, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and it's fun to now look back, and see like I mean, on the MTV show, like I wrestled as Seth Rollins, you know him as now, so like to see like at that time he was really just starting. I mean, he was very, very young in the business, and we wrestled him like 3 times on that show. And like he was fantastic. When I see like Claudio Castagnoli, like what he's done in his career, it's insane. Bryan Danielson and just all of those guys now, like they're super like big deals. Sami Zayn and Kevin Steen is like, like whenever I see them on TV, it doesn't make sense. Like I remember when Kevin Steen first wrestled like John Cena and beat him. I was like, oh my God, like he's going to beat him like in the first matchup. And it was really, it was one of those things where like, after, wrestling kind of beats you down and kind of, you sometimes don't get excited for things, but like, I got excited about that. I go, that's really like, that's huge for him. And then, he goes on and wrestles like Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm like, wow, how amazing. It's amazing to be even close to, someone who's eventually wrestling these people. So, I was super fortunate to be in that little bubble of time to meet not only meet them but also work with them and be friends with them.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. You go down those names, like you said, all the names you mentioned, like you can't mention Disco Machine and mention all these other wrestlers. So it's awesome. Like you mentioned for Wrestling Society X. Recently, we actually interviewed Baby Slice, who was in Wrestling Society X, and he was saying, how he got into it. How were you contacted? How did you end up wrestling on MTV's Wrestling Society X?
So Kevin Kleinrock he was actually with XPW earlier on, and I had wrestled Super Dragon at the Grand Olympic Auditorium, and it was like the only time I got to wrestle that. So Kevin Kleinrock was working backstage for XPW at the time. And I've always, Kevin's always been amazing with me and always has put me in a position to do like big things with his company. And again, I think that, the disco character was very, very good for wrestling promoters because it was like that kind of variety of this. I always say it's very pro wrestling to have a character like that on there. So, whereas I may not have been the greatest wrestler, I feel like I could mesh with, I could wrestle anybody and just do my gimmick. And it was like, it would totally be kind of the spice of the show, the variety that they are always looking for that other people may not have had. So it was always one of those things that they always saw that as like, just the flamboyancy and also the dancing part of it, that they could match me with different people. And it could be good. And so like, I got lucky in that respect. Like and also it was like, it was easy heat. You either loved me or you completely hated me. So it's like, you were never on the fence about, who I was or what I was doing. And that was also a blessing as well. Nothing I planned, but it's just something that kind of happened. But but Kevin's always kept me in mind for the projects that he does. Same thing with Dave Marquez. And so they were involved in that. And I just kept on here, in wrestling, you always get like drips and drabs of like, hey, be available for something, And I was like, and it's like, and any wrestler can tell you this too. You're always kind of like, okay, I'm fed up with this. I got to get a way out of this. This is not only taking a toll on my body, it's on my mind. Everybody's crazy. And then all of a sudden they're like, I want to be on MTV on a TV show. And I'm like, damn, okay. So it's like, that's how those things happen. It's like, just when you want to leave, and then they suck you right back in. And that's the way it happened. It was, and then I still didn't believe it until we were on the set, and I'm like, I'm on the set. I'm like, this hasn't happened. It's, until we walk out and hear my music, it hasn't happened yet. So, I had a similar feeling about, it was actually a year before when I wrestled, at Karakawin Hall. And I said, like, I couldn't believe, like I said, like, until I hear my music and I'm in that ring, I haven't wrestled there yet. So it's like, and it finally happened, and it was magical, So, again, I've been blessed throughout my whole career to, be, in the ring with, tremendous people, but also tremendous opportunities from people behind the scenes as well.
No, oh yeah, most definitely. Especially like you said, once you get in there, then you feel like you've accomplished it, you've done it. Especially Wrestling Society X, did you think that was gonna last that short, or did you see it going for many years? Like, how was it during the set, especially behind the scenes? Like, what were your initial thoughts of Wrestling Society X?
The initial thoughts was, I mean, if you were on the set of it and everything, you would have thought like, oh wow, this has some legs. I mean, they have some money behind it. There's a ton of great things, and the MTV executives, they loved like that 70s team as characters. In fact, we not only had the first tag match, we had the most tag matches during that season, and they loved us. They loved that that we were just the flamboyancy of our characters and stuff like that. And I mean, the talent there was like incredible, and like it seemed like it had legs, and they were talking about like, we would love to take this on tour and do some other stuff. And then, as anybody in TV will tell you, it's like, that's where the backstage politics come in, as far as TV and networks. And, at that time, some politics of like who is involved behind the scenes, that had kind of changed. So, and there was different sensibilities back then, and kind of what we were trying to do. We were really trying to push the envelope, but they were not interested in that. The new regime that came in wasn't interested in that. And so, I mean, very quickly, I mean, within the season, it was basically, it was over before it started, basically. And but this could happen to any TV show. I mean, there's TV shows that happens all the time. So again, when you bring something like wrestling into TV, and I've heard it said before, the way to ruin wrestling is put TV in it, and that's exactly what happened to us, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, like I was mentioning, Alex and I interviewed a couple of wrestlers that were also on it, and they pretty much said the same thing as you said, that they were full forward, they're ready to go, that there was a possible pay-per-view. They were talking about other merchandise like video games and all these other promises. And like you said, some wrestlers say, well, let's just wait and see what happens at the first season, and hopefully this thing has legs. And Alex and I watched every episode. We loved it because we're more Ruthless Aggression era, so we didn't get that WCW and that ECW. So to see Wrestling Society was like a breath of fresh air and something new and exciting. And I know there's fans are like, oh, it was all right. I'm like, no, this is something different. Like, how do you not like this? Like, it's on TV. It's finally something other than WWE. And then TNA came out around that time.
Right.
So I honestly loved it.
Yeah. And I mean, and we got to wrestle like the Dragon Gate guys. And it was like, that was like a huge, like amazing for me personally, because I mean, I was such a fan of all those styles. And, I'd watch Genki Horiguchi in Michinoku Pro when he was the surfer, and so like just even I had a knowledge of him, and Yoshino was like an amazing, because I remember him from like, I think he was in 2TP potentially, but he was in the Italian Connection. So I'm just like, I knew his history and and background, and I was like, it's just amazing. And there's a lot of people that sometimes watch wrestling. They don't watch wrestling, so they don't know the people, and their histories, but I actually did. And we were talking before about, like when I wrestled also in England and Germany as well. So one of the things that was super surprising about all that was that how many people like just wrestling fans, how much they know about wrestling and they crave it. They look for things. I mean, that's the way I was, searching for tapes and stuff like that. So the first time I wrestled when we did for PWG, we wrestled in Germany, and I wrestled at that time. His name was Tommy End. He's now Aleister Black. And so him, after the match, he had, we did a 6-man and he pulled us aside. He goes, "Oh man, it's such a pleasure to wrestle you." And, we've, blah, 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 blah. And it was like, "Oh no, man, it's like, this is awesome. This is totally fun. First time in Germany." Great. He goes, No, this is a big deal because we used to get your videotapes of Revolution Pro. And I'm just like, how does Revolution Pro on a videotape make it to Germany, right? And so that was a big thrill, and it's like it was the power of the internet, the fact that people could trade tapes and know of people, and so wrestling's it's thrived because of the internet, but it's also just as easily gone down because of it. There's almost too much information and out there as well.
No, I agree. I kind of love that, like, something that I don't want to know. Like, I don't need to know about that. I want that secrecy and that just like, oh, I want to know. I know I'm not going to find out and I'm going to have to chase after it. And that feeling is kind of gone. But, there's still, I love fans that kind of, how do I say it? Kind of want to go back to that time the wrestling has moved, like you said, especially if internet has kind of just steamrolled over that. And
well, that's why MJF is so like, you don't know, like exactly. He is such an enigma that you don't know. And that's what makes him so appealing in this day of wrestling and in the information era. It's like, you can look up anything, but like him, you still have that thing. And like, he's great. He's fantastic.
Right. It's still, like you said, fans are still trying to dig and find something, like him being nice to a child or petting a dog. I'm like, no, I don't want to see that. I want to see him give someone the middle finger.
Exactly. That's why he's so awesome.
Right. And like, I wanted to ask you another thing before we move on about Wrestling Society X, and that the roster, like you said, is just amazing. You had you, Joey Ryan, Human Tornado, Jack Evans, Vampiro, Chris Hamrick, and New Jack. You have any fun stories with those guys? Anything backstage?
Matt Seidel was also there. Cole Cabana. Matt Classic. I don't want to. But he did Matt Classic and Teddy Hart. Oh my gosh! Like, so I'll give you. Actually, M Dog was on there as well, and he was actually.
That's Matt Cross, right?
Matt Cross, and he was actually a replacement. It was supposed to be Pac. It was or Pac, if people know him as, but it's actually Pac. But that was supposed to be him, and he didn't make it from England in time, and so M Dog was on there. The story that I will give you is so Teddy Hart is amazing. Like, it's everything that you think that he is like, he's another guy who's like as crazy but also as cool as you probably heard, and he's a tough nut to crack, and but like I love talking to him. I thought he was so fun to be around, and I didn't wrestle him, but I got to experience him. And one of the things that we had this big kind of first day meeting, we all had a really early call time, and we're going to be shooting like all during the day. And so it was very early. I remember maybe 7 a.m. or something like that. And like Vampiro, Vampiro, who was a part of the kind of the management team, I'll say, like, for basically kind of organizing people, and a lot of the other MTV and other wrestling people. But we walk in and we see Vampiro, and we kind of walk by, and then we see the whole set for the first time, basically, before we even have kind of like even looked around. But we're just gonna have like a team meeting with everybody there, and I kid you not, Teddy Hart is doing he's basically doing a handstand, but it's on one of those guardrails. Like, my thinking is like, it's completely dangerous because like, I figured like, if he just kind of just wiggles it, like it could fall and he would fall to his probably his death. But not only was he doing a handstand on the guardrail, but he was doing kind of push-ups. So he was doing like vertical push-ups.
Wow.
And it was like, but not in any prompting. No one had asked him to do this. He had just, that's what he was just doing for that, whatever that minute was. I'm just like, wow. Like that's the first time I ever saw him like in person or ever met him really, was he was doing handstand push-ups on a guardrail just randomly. And he was, I said like that's exactly, if that's like the embodiment of Teddy Hart right there. That's all you need to know. He was like that every time you saw him, and just had that electric personality. It was that's the funny story that I have from those days.
That's awesome. When you said guardrail, I put my hands like this. Like, how would he? There's no way. Like, it just seems impossible to do that.
No, and to think like people jump up and then they do like a backflip off of that, that's even risky. But to do it that way, it was incredible. It was an incredible, not only incredible feat of strength, but incredibly insane.
Oh no, it just sounds dangerous. Just picturing him do it, I'm like, yeah, he would. I could see him doing something like that, but it's just
absolutely
insane.
Exactly.
Another thing we want to talk about. I'd love talking about Wrestling Society X and everything that you did in your career. But I want to go just a step back. As a kid, did you grow up loving wrestling? Were you into like collecting? As you saw, like I have a bunch of figures here and like watching WWF at the time. Did you instantly become a fan as a child?
Oh yeah, my first live wrestling event that I went to was in 1985, and I had watched wrestling in Arizona. It came on like 10 p.m. on Sunday nights, and it was just, this was before like Saturday night's main event and all that stuff. It was just the regional, like the one from like Allentown, I think it was, a taping. And so like my first match that I went to was a year after Hogan had held the title, and he was actually wrestling the Iron Sheik again. It was like the year anniversary of Hogan. So it was like 84, then 85. So it was January of 85 was for my birthday, and my mom had got us tickets. So I saw Iron Sheik, Hulk Hogan, Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis are the tag team champions. They wrestled the Briscoe brothers, Mr. Fuji, and so I love Mr. Fuji was actually still wrestling at that time, and it was Greg Valentine and Tito Santana. So like it was really like the heyday of like WWF, like right before that was WrestleMania was in March of 85. So it was right before all the big boom of everything. And so, yeah, so I was in high school, I was a huge wrestling fan, and I would watch it all the time. I would record it all the time. And, and cable, we had just gotten cable. So I was watching all the TBS stuff. And then we had like an Arizona regional channel. So I would see like UWF wrestling from the Bill Watts era, and then world class. So like I was super into it. I didn't get into like tape trading until later, and I found out all about that. But I was like, yeah, I was a super huge fan. And I was a huge Roddy Piper fan, a huge Ric Flair fan. And I eventually got to meet Roddy Piper. I have a picture with him on a show, and I got to meet him, and I told him, I said to him, I said, you're why I do this. And he was really super nice. I expected him to be, like whenever you meet your idols and stuff like that, to be a lot more arrogant, but he said, "Oh, God bless you, man. Like, I appreciate it." And it was like, he was very humble, very nice. And I was glad to meet him because I think he died like either within a year of that or a year and a half. So I was really lucky that I got to meet him. So yeah, I was a huge fan, huge.
Wow. No, that's also like you said, sometimes they say, don't ever meet your heroes, but meeting Roddy Piper and the way he was, that's awesome to hear. So is it safe to say, like, someone like Roddy Piper, right away, was there a moment or was there a match that you said, you know what, I'm going to be a professional wrestler, this is what I want to do? Was there a precise moment?
Well, it's more for me. It wasn't like I didn't see it as a job. The people that wrestled, like for instance, like Scorpio Sky is a guy who came through the Rev Pro school, and he's a professional wrestler as his vocation. It was never I never wanted it to be my vocation, but I always wanted it to be like, some people played softball, or, they play poker. I wrestled, it's like, it was more like that for me. And then, things, it just started like snowballing about the things that we were doing. But I just wanted the opportunity to do it. And it was one of those things where it just kind of like, I just kept on getting more opportunities, the more people I met and the more things I did. And it was just kind of stayed with the club, as it were. And I said like, oh, the club's getting bigger, and the club's doing bigger things. And I'm moving to another club, and then we're going to do some other things. So it was kind of like one of those things. So I never saw it as a job. It became a job when I took on a lot more responsibility. But wrestling was never my job. It was something fun that I did. And it was always kind of weird for me. Like, a lot of people stressed about, getting paid and getting paid properly and getting paid more. I had a day job, and so I was like, I never really had to worry about that. So this was all supplemental income, and sometimes I didn't even get paid. So it's like, it didn't matter. But but for Roddy Piper, going back to that, I just loved the fact that he was, it's even look back on it today, like his personality was so over the top, and he was really quick with one-liners. Bobby Heenan was another guy who was super fast, very quick-witted, and could put you down, and you didn't even know what he said. It's like it's like already on to the next thought. So I always admired that, how quick they were. And then just the way that, even the way Roddy Piper wrestled was interesting, because he wasn't a technical wrestler. And one of his cutoffs was just a poke to the eyes. And there's actually a video of it, if you could look it up. It's like him like just taking his two fingers and poking someone in the eye. They're have a huge barrage on him, and just like poke him in the eyes really quickly. And it's like, that's a move. That's insane. So I just love the fact that just the way that he was such an entertainer, and he really, really got people either to hate him and then eventually, loved him, so so that was basically it. And I also like the theater part of it, but also the acting and then the athleticism. So it's like, it was a little bit of everything in it. And I felt like if you were just doing one part of it, then you were kind of missing out on, the other entertainment aspects of it. And even like the, the costume part of it. It's like, I designed a lot of the people that for Rev Pro, their costumes and their masks and stuff like that. So I was getting a lot from it, even though that it probably took away from my in-ring stuff, because I was doing a lot of other things around it.
No, I love it. Like you said, Roddy Piper, he could bring heat like no one other. Like, he just go out there with just, like you said, mannerisms, or he could just do that eye poke, and people hated him. Recently, Alex and I were watching, like you mentioned earlier, Olympic Auditorium, and went back in the torture days, and I was watching his clips in there, and the heat he was getting from the crowd was just like riots were going on the things he was doing.
Yeah, and if you remember correctly, he would wear a kilt to the ring. So it's, automatically, it was like people say he's wearing a dress and stuff like that. And, whenever he would like go to take it off, and like people would like whistle at him and stuff like that. And so he had heat from like the second he walked out there. And it was like, he really, really embodied like what was great and what was great about wrestling, but what was actually really seedy about wrestling as well. That's the thing I always say, like, when I first saw that match in 1985, you could still smoke in the, it's where the Phoenix Suns played, it was a Veterans Memorial Coliseum. You could still smoke in there. So it was actually a smoky arena like it used to be. Yeah. And then like 6 years later in 91, I saw Wrestle War 91 there, you know, the one with Brian Pillman, and he had his he got power bombed by a Sid and hit his head on the cage. So I got to see some great wrestling at that Coliseum.
That's awesome. I love it. So much history. Like you said, as a kid, you know, watching it and living it, and then, you know, becoming a wrestler, it's amazing. I want to talk a little bit after now. So, you know, became a fan, you loved it, you knew you want to, you know, become a professional wrestling and do it. What school did you go to? Was there a specific, you know, school you want to go to? Or like you said, you met some of the wrestlers earlier that you mentioned in the podcast. How was training, and where did you end up going, you know, to train specifically?
So, I mean, I started with Revolution Pro, and again, we were very in punk rock style, do it yourself. We would basically, we would just, you know, we would just watch so much wrestling and just like, and then just, you know, repetition, doing it over and over again. Mr. Excitement was really good because he was really good at the physical part of it, but he also knew how to, you know, put on holds, and we got really good really quickly just from picking up on things. But then we definitely wanted to get better, so we started, you know, venturing outside of it, working outside of it, working with other people. But then I would go to the New Japan dojo, and I worked out there a lot. There was also a lucha place. It was actually called Gil's Garage, and it wasn't for the I won't say faint of heart, but basically it's like you just don't go to Gil's Garage and just become a wrestler. I mean, I actually Superboy, who was at the time another guy who worked in Michinoku Pro, so I was super lucky to meet him at the time, and I told him that I wanted to get better and learn that style. And I'm really glad I did, because it served me really well when I went to Japan, and I was working with a lot of guys who had trained in Mexico and Mexico City, and it's also different. I'm not sure if you know the difference between the American style and lucha styles. You know, I like locking up on one side or the other, and you know, being able to do things and just having that kind of dual mentality when it comes to, you know, not just working one style. And so so, and then me and a lot of other people would always love to train. We always loved to train, and sometimes training was funner than actually wrestling on shows, because you just, you know, work on stuff, but you could also teach other people things. When we started teaching, like a guy like Peter Avalon, you know, he was just on Cole Cabana's podcast talking about the days when he would go and just train and stuff like that. We would go and just like, we never were very discriminatory about giving advice or help with you know, certain things. We wanted everybody to really do well. So, but we love training. So it was fun. And so and then when we went other places, we'd always work into their trainings as well. When I went to Osaka Pro, like they had a training thing, and I'm like, oh my God, like I have to go to the training. And what I found out was the people that were really good, for instance, like Chris Hero would always be like, oh man, can I go somewhere and train? And can I, and so like we would drive, you know, places and go and train different places late night, and because they wanted to get more knowledge and get more training, and they were never good enough. And I always admired that.
I love it. I love that you mentioned these things as yourself, that you just have that passion, the love for the game, that I just want to train and learn and pick each other's brains and say, let's try this and try that, which is awesome to hear. And with training and getting, you know, all those names you mentioned, what was the best advice you got, you know, training with them and working with those gentlemen?
Well, you know, I remember one time, actually, this was more, you know, I had to question, like, did I want to do this? In fact, you know, it's something that I used to say to myself, like before, every time I wrestled, I used to say, like, you know, you fought to do this, just go out there and have fun. And I had to remind myself of that a lot. But one of the things was, I think the one thing that I always kept in my mind, and then I would always hear is like, you hear people say all the time that I'll do anything to do this. I'll do anything to do this. Well, sometimes it's doing 1,000 squats. Sometimes it's doing 1,000 push-ups, and sometimes it's just being there and making sure everybody gets the ring gear, and takes it to the back, or bringing equipment so they have a sound system. It's like there's a lot of forms of I'll do anything to be a part of this. And I wish that a lot more people had that mentality. It would have helped me, but I took a lot of it on myself. But I think that's the biggest thing that if I were to give advice to people, it's like, you have to do everything to understand, really what it takes to put on a show. Like it's not just the wrestling, and sometimes the show itself is the easiest thing during the process, because it's like there's a lot of, I always said, like, I would work out all week for 10 minutes on the weekend. It's basically that's how it goes. And I would work out also because I take my shirt off when I wrestle. I don't want to embarrass myself. So it's putting in the work. But also there's a lot of you have to stay headstrong as well as body strong as well. And Mr. Excitement said it a lot. You build your body up so you can break it down. So you also know that it's not a tough. It's a very tough thing to do, and sometimes you take it for granted until you get hurt. Like, oh, wrestling's going to go on. Wrestling doesn't care about me. It doesn't care if I have a broken arm. It's going to go on without me. So that's also something that also I had to keep in mind is stay grounded when it came to all that.
Oh no, very true. Like many people say, wrestling is a machine. It's going to keep on going. It doesn't stop for anybody. So
yep,
very true.
Yep.
So with training and getting all that advice, fast forward, when did you make your debut, and how was it the first time you going to that ring and wrestling in front of a crowd for the first time?
Oh gosh. My first match it didn't happen. My first match. I was supposed to wrestle for, I think it's not Incredibly Strange Wrestling. It was something like that, but it was in San Francisco, and we're going to wrestle on the show. And it was, the show itself was like, it was a wrestling show, but it was more like a show. How do I explain this to make it sense? It had wrestling to it, but it was more like themed, like it was crazy. It was like the name of the show was Killing the Business or something like that. And basically they were trying to be outrageous more than put on a real wrestling show. And it was literally like it was like in a place you would have never known it was a wrestling show there. Let's just say that it was like in a room somewhere in San Francisco. Well, I was supposed to wrestle this other guy, and it never happened because instead of being the main event, the people that were running the show went in and they just basically took like a toaster and a microwave and they put like hypodermic needles in the corner. It was everything. And then they put like razor blades, and it was insane. Then they shattered like glass, and they went nuts. And I'm just like, I'm not gonna roll around here. It's like, this is insane. And plus they were supposed to do it at the end of the show, I think. And I was like, I think, and I'm glad that match didn't happen because my actual debut was in Mexicali, which was I didn't expect to happen, but it happened that way. And those matches, I look back at them and they were awful. But it also got me to understand wrestling and like where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And like I said, if I did it once in Mexico, that was punk rock credibility. But then through the encouraging of people, I got more opportunities, and I got better at it and actually got focused on what it actually wrestling was. Before it was just a concept. So it's like, I've seen it. Now I've been in there. It's like, now it started kind of forming like, how to do it and how to be good at it and how to work the crowd, but also, there's a lot of factors that go into it that are not just wrestling. So, but I was fortunate to have the opportunity that I did. And so, yeah, it was, your debut match is that's why I wish that, a lot of students, I wish things were more like the, kind of the way that New Japan does it, where they actually have so many matches and they're only trying to get on a Boston Crab in the end. And then they do a lot of time limit draws, because that style helps you just understand what wrestling is and how to structure it. There's a beginning, there's an end. And sometimes, they're always trying to find that end. And then when they finally kind of graduate, then they can finally start breaking out of the character, dressing a little bit differently. I wish wrestling was like set up like that. I think I would have thrived in something like that, in that environment. Yeah.
Oh, very true. Like you said, there's so much elements that come to it. Like you said, from the outfits to the psychology of it, the storytelling. You hit the nail on the head by saying that 100%. And then from the debut, which I like to mention, that's also that you made your debut like outside, the States and Mexico, which is this insane.
I was glad. I was super glad that nobody saw it.
I was gonna say, no, I wasn't here. It didn't happen.
Yes, exactly.
But how was it too? Like to go to Mexico and then the crowd, like how was it? Like was it different than wrestling in the States, especially for your first match? It was insane.
Yeah, it's like I was glad that with lucha, it's such a different style. So there's a lot, there's a lot more forgiveness for that, that. And we were doing an American style, I'll say. It's just more like punching and kicking. And so it was like, they were kind of conditioned more for that, but it was interesting. It was cool because it was like in a little arena that was it was actually made for wrestling. It was Arena Huracan Ramirez, which was, they actually, it was specifically for wrestling. So it was a very interesting little venue, and we wrestled over like 2 days. And I wrestled like in a battle royal, but then I also wrestled like in a singles match. And then also the guys that I was wrestling with got opportunities too. So yeah, it was fun, but I was glad to like get it over with, and glad that, looking back on it, if I looked at it now, I'd probably be like, oof, it's probably even worse than I remember. But at the time it was exciting. It was super exciting to know that what I was doing, and that I got the opportunity to do it once, let alone, 400 or 500 times.
That's awesome. Now we hear a lot of similar stories where wrestlers like in your moment, man, I'm doing great. And then you watch it 10 years later, like, it wasn't so hot as I was, imagining it. Just awesome.
Yeah. For us, when I look back at stuff, it actually is better than I remembered, which is good for me, because I'm just like, we were very hard on ourselves about how we wanted to be and what we wanted to do. And if we slipped just a slight bit on something, the match is over in our heads, it's like, because we want everything to be perfect. But looking back on it, I'm very, very proud of what we did and what we created.
Oh no, 100%. And to follow, so passing that, then going to the character disco machine, how did you come up with that character, especially with the outfits, the entrance? I mean, I was watching it again earlier when you come with the disco ball. I saw that the ref had it over you, or your ring valet had it over you. Like, how did you come up with the whole concept? Like, where did that come from?
Well, it's funny because like I didn't come up with it myself. It was actually given to me. I remember because my real name is my real last name is Mondragon. So and it's funny because like I'm legitimately the only dragon in wrestling. Like that, I'm the only person with actually the word dragon in their last name. And people thought I should have used my last name as in my wrestling character. But it's so, but for some reason they kept on calling me Disco Dragon, because there was another in our little group that before me, and I didn't know who this was. There was somebody named Disco Dragon or something like that. And then someone astutely said that I should be Disco Machine, because I think it was more like during the times of like the Love Machine art bar, or the machines, in WWF, in the 80s. But I just go, okay, I'll just do it. And I'll just, and then I saw in Toriumon, Magnum Tokyo. And I was like, oh, that is awesome. I would love to do that. So basically, I mean, it's no secret that I mean, all the inspiration came from Magnum Tokyo. And there was a point at one time where that was actually going to happen. I was actually going to be in, and I can't remember how it was supposed to happen, but how he might have been coming out to California and there was something going on, but yeah, that would have been a lot of fun. It never happened, but it was, it's fun to think about. But yeah, I mean, it was totally derived from all that. So it's like, I basically took it and I was like, oh, it'd be super cool if I just carried around a disco ball and then, have it dance under it. And it's just like, it was never really a planned thing. It just kind of happened. I just kind of came out with a disco ball. It's like I just bought one. They were actually cheaper than you would expect. And the biggest thing was hauling it all around. That was my biggest problem with that. But it was worth it. I said a disco ball took me around the world, so I can't complain too much.
No, it's also 100%. That's what I think a lot of people remember right away too, because I remember when I was watching your entrance and I was like, oh yeah, of course I read disco ball. And then I'm like watching more of it, like, yeah, I remember that. It just all comes back to me. But the ref and you're dancing under it, and then even your moveset. When I was watching your highlights, I knew too there's so many compilations of your highlights, and I'm like, you did like a straight jacket, pile driver. I think you did like this wrist lock. It was I can't think of the name, but you did so many different movesets. I'm like, what can you not do? And every time you do, I think you did like a snap suplex and you did like a little shimmy, you did your dance, and I'm like, everything was just, I don't know, just awesome. Like I'm trying not to fan out, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's the thing. It's like, I always remembered that it's like, the biggest, and that's, the tassels on my short were actually kind of inspired from another Michinoku pro wrestler named Men's Teo. He also had kind of like these fringe that hang down, or like Sima also had, or Ashima had also those tassels, and it was always great, because when you dance, it's like they just go around. So it's like, again, everything kind of formed from just like my passion of these guys. So it's always working the gimmick.
100%. Like you said, everything meant something. Like even if you do a simple suplex, you had to do a shimmy that fans just hated it. Like, oh, this guy's dancing again. Like everything you did meant something, which is awesome. And doing the character and then going a little bit past that to PWG, that's what I want to go back to, because just reading, Alex and I created this structure of all the notes and stuff I want to ask you, because you have such a wide body of your career. It's like I'm trying to go back and forth. It's saying, going back to PWG, what was it like your first event, and also before the event, who created the name and then the logo of it?
Well, that's one of the things that one of my legacies. I actually created the PWG logo, so that's my creation. Whenever I see it, it's still being used to this day. That's also, it's one of the things that I'm very proud of. And it was just like a kind of a random thing, because, and if I'm not mistaken, it was from there was the Epic promoter kind of said it. It's kind of one of the most infamous moments of my career. And it's funny that I joke with people that I've been on America's Most Wanted. Do you remember that happening? There was a wrestler out here named the Messiah who had actually been assaulted. So, and it was from the America's Most Wanted. So I was actually on America's Most Wanted talking and about just kind of wrestling and stuff like that. And basically it kind of sucked, because that episode of that show was like, oh, wrestling's fake. And Messiah got assaulted. So it was kind of a weird little piece, but in any event, so I was on that. And at that time, the Epic promoter went on there and had kind of mentioned that wrestling was kind of an underground guerrilla type of event or something like that. So I think it was born out of that, if I'm not mistaken. So Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, not GO, but GUE. Actually, that's where it all came from, I believe. And so, yeah, so, I mean, and the first event was like, we basically did it just because we're like, well, why not? It's another show that we can wrestle on. We all kind of pooled our money together. That's how the PWG 6 came to fruition, was basically us just putting money up. And then we became the owners of it. And it's just like, we were just trying to just do another show. It wasn't like we were trying to really set the world on fire, because at the time, UPW and New Japan and even AWS at that time was bigger than us. And we just wanted another show. And we had some connections to get, people on the shows. And at the time, like AJ Styles, no one was, I won't say they weren't using them, but we go, hey, we can get AJ Styles, we can get Loki, we can get these guys from the East Coast that, CM Punk was on our shows at the beginning as well. So we just had these connections, and we're just like, let's just do it. And, it'll be another show for us, basically. Again, it's just, we just outlasted everybody. And I think that's also a good lesson too. It's like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's like everybody thinks that, like, oh, you're going against these people, you're not going to do well. And, oh, and it's 6 workers too. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. We're just like, it's just, for us, it was just another show to wrestle on. And so, like, but it was ours. We could figure it out later, what we wanted to do with it. And just kept on getting bigger and bigger. And we kept on just doing different things. And it was, we were doing things that other people didn't want to do. So it was like, we're just kind of forging our own path.
No, 100%. I just love how you're just, we did it because, we just wanted to wrestle on the show, and all your friends, were involved. And like I said, for the love and the passion of it. And it just became this huge thing, like you said, around the world, where people right away associate the names, like just the names you mentioned. And then the names that I'm reading, like Kenny Omega, and you mentioned Excalibur, Frankie Kazarian, AJ Styles. I mean, there's like a huge list that wherever they go in their careers, PWGs always be attached to them, and especially an event that Alex and I were talking about earlier, BOLA, Battle of Los Angeles, which is also a huge event. Who came up with Battle of Los Angeles?
I believe at the time, Rage Against the Machine had come out with the Battle of Los Angeles. So we said, hey, that sounds like something cool. We should just do that. And also I think that, if I'm not mistaken, and I might be remiss on this one, that at the time, like the NBA All-Star game might have been in LA at that time. And we were just like, and it was kind of like the Battle of Los Angeles or something to that effect. But anyway, we legitimately just said, like, hey, we're just going to do our own version of it. And we just kind of just made it, and it just became what it is. I remember, like, we were doing like I guess it was a DDT tournament. It was like, like a tag tournament as well. But that was also another thing that a lot of people don't realize too, is we took PWG as, we didn't take it seriously when it came to promoting it. And that sounds kind of odd the way I'm saying it, but you'll understand when I explain it. The way that we did it was like the conventional way back then to do, especially for California, was just a flyer. You go to another wrestling show and say, hey, there's another wrestling show if you want to go see it. Or go to, or, on the internet, on chat boards and stuff like that. And just, the conventional ways that you would do stuff. But we were just like, well, how many, for all that effort, we maybe get like a couple people. So like, let's just save our money instead of like printing flyers. Let's just do it differently. But let's just get real creative. And Excalibur was amazing at like writing these really great press releases on SoCal Uncensored And he would like, even though these matches didn't have backstories, he would make backstories out of his head and make like, hey, these guys are going to fight. Why? Because there was a time when Ricky Reyes like had taken, he'd gone to TJ Perkins' house and he had left his keys there and they didn't give his keys back, or it owes him $5, and he would just make up these elaborate, scenarios, and those got really super popular. And we're just like, oh wow, we can promote this any way we want. It's like so we started to make it like fun, and that's even where the titles of the shows came in. And we're just like, every show doesn't have to be a pay-per-view, because it would always be like, Fall Brawl, or like Halloween Havoc. But we were just like, I remember the one that I came up with that I'll take credit for is actually kind of a blessing and a curse in a sense. I made one called All Nude Review. And it was just basically I think I have another one that I'll say in a second, but All Nude Review, I'm just like, why not? Like, let's just name it. Let's just be crazy about it. Like, and people will just be interested in just a crazy name, right? I also, I think that I came up with, if my memory serves me correctly, as PWG the musical. And it actually got reported, I think, in the Observer that they're like, I think they're actually going to have like, a song and dance, or like, is this real and stuff like that. And, we just basically we had fun with it instead of just kind of naming it really like, something that's, like that. We were just kind of having fun with it. And eventually, even recently, like they're still doing shows with kind of, names that are specific to different things. But we started at, I say, because, we were just having fun with it.
Oh no, for sure. And it worked, just having fun and doing what you're doing and what you love. And those titles are the way catch me, the Nude Review and then the musical, like, for Observer to even cover that, like, wait, what is this? I want to see what it is.
Like they thought it was actually gonna happen. They were gonna have like a some sort of musical, and I was like, no.
With eye catching for sure. And with PWG, there's so many. I know it's hard to probably pick so many moments, but is there a specific moment that's your favorite? Being involved in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla.
Favorite in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Well, I mean, I wasn't there for that long. A lot of people probably don't even realize that I was a part of it. And probably like look at me like, oh, why would you leave? And it's like, for me, wrestling was never my career. And I don't think that I was I definitely wouldn't have lasted as long as they're going today. And it was only because it's like, I had other interests and other things. And at the time, it was just kind of also a transition part of my life as well. So it was probably good for me to leave. And I'm very happy and very proud of what they've built and the fact that it still runs today. I'm very proud of that. So looking back on it, I'm more proud probably of the legacy. The fact that the fact that it and still, and our goal at the beginning, I think we started, was it a year? Yeah, about a year after like Ring of Honor had started. So, at the time I'm like, wow, if this can become like the West Coast Ring of Honor, that'd be tremendous. Right. And it did, and really became, well, Ring of Honor became a lot more because it got bought out and it became a whole brand, and kind of what it's doing now in AEW is bought out, but PWG still has that punk rock mentality, even though it's big. That was really my vision of PWG is actually what it is now. I always thought that it could get to that point. But it would take more funding. It would take more effort, and just effort that I just didn't have at the time. So the fact that it's not only respected, and admired around the world, and the fact that and the fact that I was a small part of that, that's the part that makes me is probably my proudest moment.
That's also no, very true. Like you said, like it had that punk rock and that kind of underground feel. Even as a kid, I remember going to EWF like around 12, 13 and seeing those flyers there, or going to Frank and Sons where at the AWS used to host shows, and seeing that flyer and watching the matches, like watching who's going to be on the card, like the Young Bucks and Joe Ryan, so many more. I'm like, man, I got to go to this, and pleading with my father, please drive me over here. Like, oh, well, one day, but I'm okay. I'll just catch on YouTube and watch these matches. And it's just honestly what you did was amazing, just being a part of it and starting this, and so many generations to come and just watch it. Like even like I mentioned earlier, I have friends that don't really watch too much wrestling, but they've heard of PWG and they say, oh, this show that still goes on. I know they do a few a year. Like, how do I go? And I'm like, shoot, like then you know it. Then if you know PWG, then you're a true wrestling fan. And
right.
No, it's just awesome to hear. Like you said, as a fan, I want to say thank you, and I'm sure my brother too would say thank you to do this. And it really is, like you mentioned, I know you didn't want to take credit, but it is like pioneering kind of style where pretty much where SoCal indie wrestling is today, and especially the world. Like indie wrestling has come such a long way, and like you mentioned earlier, that it kind of was like in those dark ages, kind of right after like WCW, CW kind of closed down, and then kind of had a resurgence, and now it's just bigger than everywhere. I mean, every weekend there's a lucha show or some kind of wrestling show that you could go to, which is just crazy.
Yeah, it's a true testament. It's like for some reason, like wrestling kind of it's like a cockroach. Like you can't kill it, and it still kind of goes on. And there were some times when I thought that I go, you know, especially with kind of like the Me Too movement, and it was it was picking off people left and right. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you know, like and not to say that wrestlers are supposed to be held to a higher standard, but you know, wrestling is not like the NBA or you know, and MLB, and it's like it's still very, very punk rock. Obviously you have to, like, you know, live within the restraints of the laws of the United States, but I get that. But you know, in wrestling, that there's always been that kind of like kind of seediness to it, it's been the appeal of it as well.
No, very true. I mean, there's shows now that kind of copy that style. Like Alex and I are fans of a company called VXS, and they kind of have that like almost like shadiness. Where's it at? It's somewhere in Baldwin Park, and it's a lot somewhere, and it's like, let's go see it. And it has that punk rock feel to it, where like it's kind of like your own secret almost.
Yes. Yeah, and you don't know if you're going to walk out of there alive or with tetanus or something. You don't know what's going to go on.
It's so true. It's so true.
Yeah.
It also, you know, we're almost coming to the end here.
Sure.
Talking about your favorite moments, and you're mentioning about Japan and Mexico. Do you have a favorite moment wrestling in Japan and Mexico, or any fun stories over there?
Oh God. I mean, like wrestling in both places was a dream. It's, you know, when I wrestled for Osaka Pro, Mr. Excitement and I went over there, and we're super big like Japan fans just in general. We know the history. We also know the not only the wrestling history, but also the history of Japan itself. We're super big baseball fans, and we saw a baseball game at the Tokyo Dome. So we really enjoyed our time there. And then one of the times that we were there during it was called Golden Week. And it's a week kind of dedicated. Each day is dedicated to, like, there's Grandparents' Day, there's Kids' Day, there's different days. And in Osaka Bay, there was a ship, and it basically, you could board the ship and then you go around the bay, and then there's like, you know, they have like games and stuff that you can do on the ship while you go around. So it was like an attraction. Well, they had wrestling, Osaka Pro Wrestling. So I can say that I wrestled on a ship. I wrestled, it was me and Gamma versus Mr. Excitement and Tiger's Mask, I believe. And so that was amazing. Like, it's like, not only did I go to Japan to wrestle, I wrestled on a ship, a cruise liner that went around Osaka Bay. Mexico, I mean, it was great. Well, I did I did a show and it was me and Human Tornado versus Carl Anderson and Joey Ryan. I was in a Tijuana in a well, I'll say a bull ring, but actually it was the night before. It was actually used for cockfighting, and that is no lie. There was actually like feathers everywhere. They said, I guess it was legal where we were at, and that was actually for a pilot for a G4 show. That's another Kevin Kleinrock thing that I got to do. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I have tons of wrestling memories, and I can look back on all of them very fondly now and be very proud of all the things that happened.
No, that's awesome. No, I know I believe 100% the stories, like you said, wrestling in a cruise ship, and then wrestling where you said there was possibly a cockfight, which is crazy, insane.
I don't think possibly. I know that.
Well, it happened.
I know there was.
100%.
It was that bad. Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow, it's crazy. Also, talking about those moments in in those countries, do you have like a favorite match that in your career that you like to look back on?
Favorite match? Most of the matches that I mean the Super Dragon match at the Grand Olympic is always gonna actually, and there's a point in the match where I actually get knocked out in the match, and actually I think I go to a spot early and I kind of mess it up a little bit, and it was on XPW TV, the opening for like years. It's still probably there. It's a very famous kind of, I won't call it a botch. And it was just like one of those things. I was legit knocked out in the match. And you can see it too. I'm like bleeding from the back of the head from Excalibur kneeing me in the back of the head. But I will say, like, what's another match? I mean, all my Wrestling Society X matches were so much fun, and it was it was a lot of validation, because you wrestle so long, and like I wrestled TJ Perkins in or TJP now. I wrestled in a parking lot in Compton, and then when I'm wrestling on MTV, so it's like just going from like the smallest to the biggest. Wrestling in Alaska was pretty amazing. It was in a really super huge arena. But I actually was in a match in 2005. My Caracuan Hall match was, the fact I won at Caracuan Hall was like amazing. But the match that I think back to that was really one of my matches and it was just a brief moment, but it was really awesome. I was on a show and it was in Shizuoka, which was they did a thing called, it wasn't the Royal Rumble, but it was the Royal Rumbu. And so they had all these people coming into the match, and I went into the match and it was wrestling, and then I was doing my dancing in the middle of the ring while everybody else fought, and the music comes up, and Minoru Suzuki came out, and I still was dancing, and he like choked me out and threw me over the top rope, and so that was one of those moments. It's just like, oh my God, I didn't get to wrestle Minoru Suzuki, but it was like I was part of like something that was pretty awesome that he was. Yeah, so it's like those are the things that I love, and sometimes it's not even a match. It's like those little instances that will happen to you that you never expected that could have happened to you. And but as far as matches go, I mean, I loved wrestling Quicksilver and Scorpio Sky. I love wrestling Los Luchas out here. They were awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those, but again, it's hard to think. It feels like it was like a lifetime ago.
No, it's just amazing. Like I mentioned, like the body of work you do. Even right now, answering that question, I have like 100 questions after that. I mean, I know we're almost finished, but real quick, how was the wrestling in XPW? Like, how was the atmosphere? We heard like the stories about it. Like, how was it? Being part of the organization.
It was awesome, and I have to credit Ron Rivera for having just a relationship with them all, and I feel like our relationship with XPW, I felt like it rivaled when like the Lucha guys were in ECW. Obviously, we weren't at the level of Juventud Guerrera and Psicosis and Ray Jr., but we had our own style that XPW didn't have, and we were the ones that kind of brought it to them. And actually, Excalibur, Rising Sun, Taro, and Super Dragon had an amazing tag match, a show before that. So then we had that match, and Rising Sun wrestled Super Dragon on singles on a show as well. So we were really integrated into that, and they loved us, and we loved them because we got to wrestle in this big stage and wrestle for them. And actually, we had had a history with them before, and wrestled it with them in like the Reseda Country Club. And I wasn't wrestling at the time, but Mr. Excitement, Yakuza, a lot of the Rev Pro guys that were there, they'd wrestled on there. Even Scorpio Sky and Quicksilver had wrestled on shows before. So we had a great little connection to XPW. They were always tremendous to us. But everything you've heard about XPW, that lifestyle of how they were, that was true, all true, but they also loved wrestling as well. They also like wanted to be like great wrestlers in their own rights. So it's like, again, it kind of worked out for everybody that we got to do all this stuff. And, but they always made us feel welcome. And we always wanted to enhance their shows, but they were enhancing us in the same respect.
No, that's awesome. Like you said, we all know the stories. I know Dark Side of the Ring covered it, but all the rest say the same thing. No, they love pro wrestling. Like it was in their blood. They love doing the shows and having all these wrestlers on it. And another thing too, you mentioned like Minoru Suzuki, which is great, was awesome. And then you mentioned you wrestled in the Olympic. Taking back, how was it going to Olympic? Now we know that's closed down now. But wrestling at the Olympic Auditorium, like what was your mind going when you went to the ring, especially wrestling that arena? Like how was it? Like we know Ali fought there. We know the history of Oscar De La Hoya, like made his professional boxing debut, and Mascaras wrestled there. I mean, there's so many things that happened there. Like how was it wrestling in the Olympic Auditorium?
Yeah, we were supposed to actually wrestle there on another show, and it didn't happen. So this was a big deal, and I knew the history. I think if I'm not mistaken, like Elvis Presley, played there, and Man on the Moon was shot there, and I actually went to go see like a mixed martial arts show there called Jaraka, which was amazing. And so like there was other lucha shows, and so yeah, I knew how big it was. I tried not to let that cloud my vision, but it was like again, it's like when you're out there and you're wrestling in that many people, you actually don't think about it. You just think about what you're doing, and you don't see anybody. You hear them. If you get good, you can look around and but it kind of takes you out of it. But I think that when you're there, you don't see faces. You hear people, but it's like you're concentrated on what you're doing and wanting to do that well. And I said, I'll worry about it later. I'll think about it later. But I came out of that. Remember, like I actually I didn't get stitches, but I had a very big cut on my head. So I didn't really get to, admire it too much. But looking back on it, it's like, it was a huge accomplishment at the time. And gosh, it's hard to believe that was like over 20 years ago. Like that even that doesn't make sense. That it was like in 2001, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's awesome. I know a lot of people would love to have that in their bucket list, wrestling there, but so much history has gone there. It's just amazing. So another thing we wanted to ask you too, real quick, do you still follow pro wrestling? Do you still watch it to this day, either WWE or AEW? And what's your thoughts on today's pro wrestling?
It's funny because I had a feeling that you might ask me this question. I actually thought about it beforehand. And so I had actually stopped watching like WWF wrestling or WWE kind of when Owen Hart died. That broke my heart when that happened. And so, I mean, like I knew what was going on, and I know, like, like Paul London and Brian Kendrick. I was friends with them, and I knew everything that they did, and I'm, just the people that went there and what they were doing. So I would keep one eye on it. Eventually, when I got out of wrestling, which was like around 2011, 2012, that's and I was actually I want to give a shout out to John Ian, who had passed away. He had a promotion called Mach 1. So I was still training at that time, and like I wrestled like Brian Cage on one of those shows, and Rocky Romero as well. So it's like, I still had my foot in it, but then eventually I left, and I took about like a 10-year hiatus, and luckily, Taro and a couple other friends of mine, during the pandemic, we would get together and we would watch wrestling, and it was the first time I had watched in a long time. So they got me back into it, and we have this little, we have a game that we actually play, and that we actually, so like when the tournaments come up, we actually do like a selection thing for it, where we actually guess the winners and stuff like that. So like we're doing it right now for like the tag leagues in New Japan. So the World Tag League for the juniors and the regular one. So we pick them, and then we have a winner in the end, and so we started doing that during the pandemic. So I've actually watched more wrestling in the last 3 years than I have in like the past 10 years. So like New Japan is one I love, and I watch like we'll watch like some Noah. We'll watch a lot of lucha, because I mean, lucha right now is there's a lot of fun stuff to watch on there. It's actually very accessible. Like even like Bandito has like a school down there that does regular shows. There's also Zona. I think it's called Zona. Are you familiar with that? It's like it's like in a junkyard, and they it's like deathmatch wrestling in a junkyard in Mexico.
I gotta look that up.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. One of our friends is a big Jun Kasai fan, so we watch a lot of the stuff from Freedoms and stuff like that. So it got me back into it, and I can be a fan again. I usually when I would watch wrestling before, I'm like, oh, that's cool, I should use that as a variation of what I'm doing here. And so watching as a fan and watching as a worker is a lot different now. So like I can watch now and go like, oh my God, like I used to do that. That's crazy. So like, but yeah, I got back into it, and but I don't watch very much American wrestling. Even AEW, I don't watch very much. I watch whatever's on YouTube and stuff like that. And, I check in on Excalibur and see, all the people that I know that are wrestling there now. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically it. But I got back into it, but I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say I'm a hardcore fan again.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that you're watching it again and enjoying it. And pretty much now we're coming to the end. I just want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast. But for some of our listeners and some of our watchers on YouTube, I know you mentioned earlier some of the advice you got and some of the advice you got over the years. For someone who's watching this that's thinking about being a pro wrestler or even going to the business behind the scenes in professional wrestling, what advice would you give those people?
So it's funny that you asked that. My first advice would be don't do it. My second advice is you're not going to listen to my first advice. So if you're going to do it with all your heart. Don't and go full throttle. Don't try to do everything you can. Do it with passion. Don't question yourself. Get in there, work hard, but also be valuable for the people that you're working for, and you're gonna find a lot of success in just being available and a hard worker, and not asking a lot of questions, but asking, how can I help? How can I make this better? That's my best advice.
Nice. No, that's 100%. I mean, I've heard similar saying, no, don't ask like, oh, what I want to do, what I can do for you, pretty much. And that's awesome advice. before we head out, also, is there anywhere where the fans could, reach you, or they could follow you, whether you have a YouTube or Instagram or any kind of social media?
Sure. I actually do with Taro, Angelo Trinidad. He used to be a PWG announcer, or ring announcer, and also Cowboy Jack Durango. On Tuesday nights, we do the Baseball Brew Crew. It's a podcast talking about old baseball and craft beer. We've done that for 135 weeks straight. So you can find us if you look on YouTube under Baseball Brew Crew. We're trying to get to 1,000 followers. So please like and subscribe, turn on notifications. I also do a show on Thursdays with two of my friends from the Food Network. They're actually pumpkin carvers. It's called Carvers and Creators. That's also on YouTube. Go to YouTube and look up Carvers Creators. And we've done like over 100 shows, and we have like great artists from around the world while my buddies pumpkin carve, and we have a great time. So yeah, definitely follow there and like and subscribe.
No, awesome. There you go. Baseball Brew Crew and Carvers and Creator. Go follow them on this episode of Champion Line. All those links will be down below. So click and follow, and that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, Disco Machine, to be on the show. It's an honor and a privilege to hear all these stories, and pretty much just listen to everything. I enjoyed every second of it. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure. It's nice to be remembered.
We definitely remember you. Pleasure's all mine. For the fans, please like, comment, subscribe here on YouTube. Also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and as well Twitter and Apple Podcasts. Once again, thank you so much. This Machine signing off. Championship Line podcast.
Take care.